Hey guys, welcome to the podcast. We're here with Ashton Farley, and he's got some barriers of writing he'd like to talk about today, so let's bring him on.
I haven't heard my full name in forever.
Oh,
it's
yeah.
Weird. I haven't even said my last name.
I just did, so it's Ashton Farley in case you
It's
forget.
also being weird, like, being called by my full name by my dad. That's not really something that happens too much.
Well, we didn't even put Tate in there. It's just Ashton Farley at this point.
I
It's
always thought
official.
Tate was like a weird name.
It is.
Because it's like, I've actually seen it as a first name. There's
Mom,
some names.
Your mom picked it, so that's why you got that one. So.
Yeah, I mean, it was going to be the other way around for a moment there.
It was about to be Tate Ashton, and then you became Ashton Tate because it sounded better, rolls off the tongue kind of thing. And Farley, that's a mess up.
I know, I don't know. I don't really like the Farley last name. It sounds weird.
We're going to get that changed.
Always called Fartley. That was like up until like
such
third
an
grade.
Easy,
And it's like potty humor when you're that little, so it's
stupid.
like that's just how.
And all of this is relevant to the writing barrier. So let's jump right into that.
So
tell me about writing barriers. What's going on with those?
Well, I think like what I mean by barriers is that like something to overcome, and it's not just like a thing in writing. It's a very like human thing to want to overcome something, and you see it a lot in like media and different things, and it's really prevalent. I also see a lot when there's like magic or something involved, because then it's like, oh, I'm at this level or whatever,
like overcoming a challenge.
Well, it works in a lot of ways. Like a barrier is such a generalization, but there's so many different ways it can be used.
So like the glass ceiling for women in the finance district?
Sure. I don't know anything about anything.
Well, there's barriers for women in the finance district. They call it a glass ceiling, and they basically don't earn as much as men.
Oh, like the wage gap and all that?
Yeah, that's another term for it.
Well, I've never heard of it. And I think of district as like a road you go down, so I just imagine a whole bunch of...
I just use my own fancy terms. It means the same thing.
Yeah, I mean...
So if you write about those barriers, how does that work?
Well, it's just like having them, at least for me, because I enjoy structure and pretty much everything, so having the barriers there, it allows you to really see, because you want the characters in your story to be as realistic as possible, and people go through change really easily.
Right.
So, and especially like in a story where big events happen left and right, those change people drastically. And having those barriers and like a barrier like checkpoint threshold, it can be called a lot of different things. But once they overcome that, later on in the story, especially like I said with magic, like, oh, I'm at this level and I go up to this level, there's a very clear distinction of, oh, I was once here and I've gotten here. It's like in like a video game, it's like you are given like levels. Like I'm this level, this level, this level.
You've
so there's
evolved.
yes, like even down to like the experience point you're at, you're better than you were before. So it kind of gives it that
upgraded version.
Yes, and there's actually a thing a lot of people struggle with, and it's a big thing that I've also heard a lot of like superhero stuff goes into, like comics and stuff, is because they go on for so long. Like, I don't know, Superman's been around since like the early like 20th century, like super old, like one of the first superheroes. If you think of like the first superhero or like one of the most iconic, it's Superman. So
he's like 200 years old.
Well, the thing is like they always go along and they become stronger, but it gets to a point where I forget what's like this, like the power ramp or something like that.
He has a power ramp?
Yep, he goes up and he sits in a wheelchair.
Does he ride his skateboard on it?
That as well. He uses the skateboard and the wheelchair on one. It's a really cool process to watch.
What episode is that one?
Like 2.
So 2. He's on the power ramp with the skateboard.
Well, yeah, someone hit him over the knee with like a brick of kryptonite, and he kind of broke his leg. So.
Dang.
Yeah, it's crazy stuff.
Street punks.
Yeah, they just get their hands on like this just bar.
There's no way he could have seen that coming or had any kind of defenses. Poor Power Man.
Power Man.
That was before he became Superman.
Just spandex and whatnot.
Yeah.
But like, it's the fact that, well, at least the problem that occurs with the power ramp is you have to get stronger to overcome an enemy, because it's always like, oh, the enemy's a little bit stronger, but then like you do whatever and you overcome the enemy because you want it to seem like a fair fight. Because if the main character
comes from struggle.
Well, yeah. So like if the main character were to steamroll everything, it doesn't matter what you're in. If you're in like a video game or whatever or any sort of media, it's super boring because there's no challenge, there's no excitement, there's no nothing that occurs.
People like drama.
That is a big part of it, and seeing that struggle, but coming out on top is the main thing.
Yeah.
And losses, like, it's kind of like you lose the battle but win the war. Like, it's an over-encompassing thing. He didn't really lose because he wins at the end. So there's
That's
never
part of the
a
hero's
loss.
journey, man. You gotta like get close to the thing and then almost lose it to only get it again.
That is part of the structure that is there. But like I said, the main problem is when it gets to such a drastic point that it's like there's nothing more powerful. You had to make
You're at the top of the
Well,
ramp.
yeah, where it's like it's gone on for so long that enemies have had to get so powerful that there's just nothing that can be made. Like Superman, like as a good example, it's supposed to be like the only thing that can kill him is like a supernova or whatever, and like he explodes inside of a dying star. But even that hasn't killed him. Like there's just comic books, especially because it came from a time where none of that was prevalent, that they just fall into those what are now cliches of, oh, I can just do that now, and then you can just do that, but then like they have to get to such a point, it's like, oh my god,
There's no more leveling up, so then they got to bring him back down to bring him back up, so it's exciting again.
well, and then like especially with like the Marvel and like the comic universe, it's always
Yeah.
like who's the most powerful in that realm, and it's gotten to the point where there's actually a dude, I don't remember, it was like a very vaguely hinted at thing, but there's a dude called the One Over All, and it's literally the writer. Like the dude who writes his stories, and that's where it has to cut off because there's no one more powerful than the dude who makes what this is. Because it's
God.
like God, no, like the gods are way lower. It's like, oh, we're dudes that can like travel through dimensions. It's like this big thing, but he's just like the ultimate supreme being or whatever.
The god of gods.
Well, yeah, it's like there has to be a cutoff point, but people don't want that. They want there to be something more and define more, and for them to like break through his barriers. But at a certain point, you can't. So trying to, for one, things can't last forever. You have to end it at a certain point.
Yeah.
But for two, what at least I'm going to try to really like manage, and that I've seen done a few times well, is really like, I don't know, trying to ration how much power you give the character. Like, a good way to do that is to have characters that are more powerful than them, or have, like, the quantity over quality, where it's like, we're not all that strong, but we do, like, a dirty trick or whatever, we manage to overcome it, so they don't
The checks and balances.
Yeah, so they don't actually have to get stronger at all. They manage to do a thing, so you don't have to buff them up to overcome the enemy.
Solving a problem in the moment.
Yeah, so you don't have to...
That's why MacGyver was awesome.
MacGyver, what's that?
MacGyver. That's a show. If you know about MacGyver,
I've heard of it.
You're probably of a certain age. It was from back in the 90s. I don't remember the guy's actual name. He was MacGyver, but like the whole premise of the show was putting him in all kinds of like totally normal life situations, and then it becomes like drastically crazy where he's got to like save someone from something exploding, and all he has is a pickle, a toothpick, and a roll of Scotch tape, and he saves the day every time with regardless of what tools are available. He always finds some weird resources, makes some makeshift thing, and is able to save the day. It was like the coolest superhero.
Yeah, I've never heard of it. Oh, I guess like MacGyvering something. That's
That's
okay,
where
that
the term
makes
came
sense.
from.
Yeah.
So like, it was this show of like every episode was so outrageous. Like he knew everything about how everything worked, all the science, all the mechanics, all the electronics, like everything everywhere. And it was just a really good representation of like being in there against a random villain that he wasn't super powerful except for he could figure out what to do with all these situations and defeat the enemy at the end of the day. And it was like, but it was based in real life. He wasn't like this fictitious superhero. He was just going through every day and happened to have all these crazy scenarios.
Yeah, so it's definitely a very interesting concept.
Yeah, we'll have to watch that one. So if you guys know about MacGyver, leave us a comment below.
Tell us how sweet we are, how sweet you are for knowing all the
knowledge.
Yeah,
I know about MacGyver because I'm a little bit older. Ashton doesn't know about MacGyver because
I've heard the legend very vaguely. Apparently.
Yeah, so now we're also going to watch MacGyver. So
how long is that?
It's a series. It was a TV show, so
I bet
it was on for years.
I
don't know.
Yeah.
We'll have to go back and check it out. Like I never counted the episodes.
Was it like live action or like a cartoon?
No, it's real.
Oh wow!
Yeah.
I'm trying to picture how that because I'm like, oh,
it's
a cartoon
90s TV, so like it's not.
The only thing I think of in 90s is like Homie and like Stewart from what was that from? In Living Color.
In Living Color?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
That's all I think about when I think of 90s live action. Like that a kid would watch is just Homie don't play that.
The old school stuff. No, this is definitely they did a really good job of like overcoming barriers all the time with MacGyver because it was like that's all the whole plot line was like give him some weird scenario and he figures his way out of it. It was really cool.
Yeah, I do like that because like I played all like the trading card games, and that was the appeal to me, was the strategies. You work with what you're given, and that's kind of what those are the resources you have, and they are so limited that you really have to think. When I'm put in those situations, that's what I love the most. Like there's a few times, like we play a lot of different games, and just when it gets to that point, that's when I have the most fun. But I remember there were so many times where like, I don't know why, but like it never happened to me in any other situation. When I'm playing card games, I'll start to shake. My hands will like start to shrink. Like I've never had that much like adrenaline when I'm like sitting there like,
so pumped in the moment.
Well, because you're like, I suck at this game, but there's like 2 opportunities in like 50 that I get to win. So I'm like, oh my god, I might actually do this. Especially when I was like in 2nd grade, I was like super little. And there were dudes that were like 30 plus, and I got kind of close. Like I remember this one time where you have a deck, and when you draw, if you don't have any cards to draw at the beginning of your turn, you lose. Oh. So I had drawn my last card. It was my last turn. The next turn I would be done. And I managed to win on that last turn. And those type of things is like what I live for. Is I'm like, yes! I actually used all the resources in like my arsenal and was able to come out on top. But that was like never happened again. That was never.
That gives you that like feeling like you can do it, and that's why gambling is so effective. Is even if you don't actually win, every time someone else does, it's like, oh, that could be me. Yeah. So if you're in the experience or you're part of it, even being around it, it creates that feeling of like possibility and like, I can do this. I don't have to have any special skills. I just have to go through it enough times.
I also cheated a lot. I would stop.
Also cheating. That helps. Like, in gambling, they don't like that.
Well, because I'd watched the TV show and I didn't even know the rules. I was like... because you have life that you like. Yeah. You have like a max amount of life, and it was like 4,000 in the game or in the show, and it's 8,000 here, and I'm like, what the heck? I thought this was how it was, and it was like I tried learning it all from the TV show, and it's like nothing like what it actually is.
Not how it actually worked in real life. So.
I don't know. Yeah, it was. I definitely had a fun time with those. Like those definitely were a big part of just how I developed like my interest in strategy and how that kind of plays into what I do. Like, I'm so, like, in awe because, and I found this because I've listened to a lot of people talk about, like, their interests and stuff, and when you are interested in something to a degree, unconsciously will start to kind of nitpick and, anything that anyone makes about anything in that field. Like, for me, it's writing. That's what I really enjoy doing. And so when you're trying to create something, you model it off of other people and you go into all the little technicalities of how they do it. So, like, whenever, and it's a lot, because people write movies as well, they have screen rights, sure. And you have to, you have to write there. So it's kind of a similar vein where, like, I've never watched a scary horror movie per se, or at least has scared me because I'm sitting there trying to pick it apart, because one of my favorite things is horror, and I so little see it done right, or at least to me done right, that I want to see like all these like, The Conjuring, the Blair Witch Project, and like Paranormal Activity, all these really, really famous ones that have gotten like a whole pentology of movies. Just
bunch of accolades. Yeah,
just a whole bunch of like awards for being super scary and whatever. And I go watch them, and half of them suck. I'm just like, why do people enjoy this as much? And I think it's because it's all about how the story doesn't matter as much, because people are like, oh, here's all the pretty colors on screen. You pay attention more to that, and like how she's floating in the chair, wriggling around and having a seizure, and she's like possessed or whatever, more than this is really weird and not really all apparent to the story. Like I remember specifically watching, it was Insidious. And that was one of the scary ones. It was, I think, maybe about the same people. No, Blumhouse. Blumhouse is like the one who does. They're famous for doing really scary movies on a really small budget.
Gotcha.
And I just remember watching the end of, I think it was the Insidious series that I watched the end of, and it turned into a Disney movie. The girl brought her mom's ghost back, and she believed hard enough that the monster wouldn't hurt her that it just kind of like faded away and died. It was like, that's not how you end a movie. Like, horror is not supposed to make you feel good. And that's why my 2 favorite, like, movies that at least I've recently watched in the horror genre are The Blair Witch Project. I already said that one. But that one, it just did it well. That I feel like the most, like...
it never showed the monster.
No, that is the key thing, is that it... And it also had a good story that it's like magic. The misdirection of telling you about something but not bringing it up until way later. Having everything intertwined and make sense is what I really enjoy about stuff, and that I try to emulate. Where they're like, oh, they make kids stand in the corner or whatever. It's like you because it's the way they did it is they put it all in like a whole bunch of rumors. So it's like I heard that she had like horse hair that was like all black and whatever, like the witch that was out there, and then like this, and there were so many rumors piled together that you didn't take any of them seriously because you're like, I don't know, like these are like folk tales, and normally when stuff becomes a tale, it gets twisted, so you're like, I'm not going to believe this because I don't know what's actually happening. But that turns out to be real, where at the end, the last thing you see is the dude standing in the corner with the girl laying on the ground. So you know what's going to happen because you were told about it earlier on, but just that fact that you already know without having any words said, like that whole, I think it was like, there's a big stretch of just screaming and like no words except for like calling out a name. That it's just like, oh my god, what is happening? Because the whole movie, nothing happens. There's no jump scares. There's no anything. I'm a really, really jumpy person. Like, I can't handle, I will like, just, I can't deal with it. I hate jump scares because for one, they're just really cheap. Like, I don't feel like, it's the kind of scare that it's not creepy. It's just like, oh my god, you just scared the crap out of me.
Shock factor.
Yeah, it's the shock, and it's very not scary. It's what people would call scary, but it's like a lot of like pop music where, oh, look at this awesome song, but it's like it's been done before. This is just a cop out because it works. People know it works. It has never failed, so we're just gonna keep doing this. But now there's nothing. It's just the ambiance, and the acting was so amazing. It was so good. It seemed so real, and they actually marketed it to be real. That was the craziest part, where they actually had all the actors lay low, so no one knew that they were alive. Because it was like everyone in that movie died that was like recording, because there were like a little group of people like that were on this mystery of this like town, and everyone that was dying, and the children being taken, and they actually like, in the movie theater, after the movie was done, they gave out like missing flyers for each of like the people, like actors in the movie, and no one knew they existed. And like this was like the 90s, so like the internet wasn't as prevalent for people to know. So it was like this actually, like people actually believed it for a time. Wow. And so just having that reality, and that's the scariest part. It's like I can talk about any movie, but almost any horror movie, if it was real, you'd be crapping your pants, because that's just not something that you do, and not something you can handle. Like, it's way different than seeing it and knowing it's not real than actually having it be real. It's just, it flips your brain. And I feel like the scariness and like what really makes something scary is having the person believe in whatever is there and creating it themselves, because someone who's scared of clowns,
it's like impressionist painting.
Yeah, where it means something different to every person. You can make it personal without actually having to make it personal.
Yeah,
where
you just nudge them in the direction. The person will fill in the details themselves.
Yeah, because like with horror, it's like they can live out all their worst nightmares through this thing that you don't actually have to say anything about. You just give very vague descriptions. And actually, that was like, I liked the beginning of Insidious. I thought it was really cool because the little girl goes up to a door and it's like a little dude talking on the other side of like, free me. Whenever something in a horror movie says free me, you don't do it because it's a demon that wants to suck out your soul. That's just how it works. So
it's pretty standard.
Well, like there's just like a long hand with like talons coming out of it that like you get to see, and that's the only part you see. Like that I'm okay with. Because I'm like,
it's impressionist.
Yeah, because it's like, holy crap.
You gotta make up the rest
thing?
of the
like,
body.
How many hands? Does it only have the one hand? Does it have multiple hands? Does it have different types of hands? And that's why Bird Box did so well. I guarantee it. Is because the idea.
Never showed the thing.
Well, also, another thing that I love is rules. Where the monster follows a set of rules. So stuff like, what is it called? A Quiet Place. It was all about, they have supersonic hearing, but they can't see anything. They're blind. So you know what you need to do, and you're given some kind of way to fight back. There's a way to do it.
Evens the playing
you just have to
field.
Be cautious.
It's that overcoming the barrier by figuring out the situations,
yes,
by knowing all the information and the rules.
That kind of like hopeless hope, where it's like I have a tiny bit, like a glimmer of light that I can hold on to. Yeah. And that's what, keeps people going, because it's like you just turn your brain off, and if you're reading something you know it's not going to work out, then it's like you're not with it.
Yeah, you're not going to believe that it's possible.
Mm-hmm. You want to keep them on that edge, and that's also why, like, Bird Box, the whole thing is like the monster will make you commit suicide because of how crazy it is. And people like speculating it's like, oh, you're seeing like infinity and what that is and comprehending that is too much for the brain or whatever, but it's just that fact where the scariest part is you don't get to see it. And in The Quiet Place, you do get to see it. It's like a giant weird monster and has like an owl ear that has like 30 different like rings inside of it, and it's just like really gross. But like then it's like, okay, this is just an animal.
Yeah.
Like an alien animal. That it's an alien too. Like you know so much about it that it's too much. Like the less you know about a monster, the less you know about a monster, the better. I feel. And so not being able to see it, they actually filmed a scene, or at least created the monster they were gonna put in Bird Box. It was still kind of creepy. Don't get me wrong, but it was like a little slug baby. And if they would have added that in, it wouldn't have done well at all.
Ruined
it would have. Well, yes, because that's the whole thing. Is like what could be so scary that it makes you kill yourself? Like that is a crazy and like creepy concept. So
yeah,
I don't
fear
know.
of the unknown is scarier than fear of the known.
Yeah.
If you know what something is, then you're really gonna figure out like, okay, here's what I believe based on what I know. But when you don't know anything, you have to make up the story in your head. It goes all crazy because you don't have a solid belief system and, like you said, a structure to create what your next move is. Because when you know, okay, this is what I think is going to happen, here's what I'm going to do next, that's easy to do. But if you're like, I don't know what the hell's going to happen, I don't know what I'm supposed to do, you make yourself crazy.
Yeah.
So that's where the fear and the uncertainty and all that, figure it out, overcome the barrier thing has to come in. It's all about allowing the person to play the role themselves instead of like letting the movie like direct everything. Same with the book, same with any kind of story you're telling. It's got to come out with like, here's enough information to you to create the picture yourself, but not enough to like, oh, here's the only thing that it could possibly be.
And you can actually take it a step further, and that's what I really like with the rings, because I watched that really recently, or at least pretty recently. It might have been a few months ago, but for one, the story was really good, like, which is not something you find as much. Like there was
With
so
the
much
ring?
lore. Yeah, the ring.
Yeah.
Where it's like the whole thing is like you watch the tape, you die, and also having that factor where that's another rule, where it's like you do this, you die, and you know that you're going to die, but it doesn't happen immediately. It's 7 days later. You have a week to live, and you don't know how you're going to die. But then at the beginning, they show you the aftermath of that little cut to the girl whose face is like soulless and like oh my god, like her eyes are rolled back in her head. It's like one of the creepiest things ever. And so having that, knowing the consequences, but not seeing how it happens is like the worst thing. And then like also like the reality aspect where you watch it as well, because there's the whole like tape shown in the thing, so you're like 7 days later, I don't know, I have a whole week to think about if I might die, that kind of thing. But also they did show the monster, quote unquote, which was the little girl Samara, but she wasn't the driving force to be scary. Like there was like, she was supposed to be scary, like
She
the ending where
was
she
just the
comes
entity it came
yes
from.
where it's like that's okay, because the whole thing isn't based around her being scary. You want to see her because she's the icon. You know what's happening with this. But also the fact that they figured out a lot of different things, and she's like, oh, the girl that goes through and tries to, solve her mystery or whatever. She's like a reporter trying to, get on it and find that next big scoop. That's kind of cliche, but, it worked out in the end, because that's not what you're about. It's gone way past,
Sure.
I'm trying to get a paycheck. I'm trying to live and not have everyone die. But they gave them false information, where she puts the girl's body to rest, and she's like trying to feel sad for him, and you kind of feel for like the little girl too, because she was born and she wasn't supposed to be, and she cursed like her whole family and whatever, and her mom put her down the well and she died. And so you like find her skeleton. It's like super creepy, and then the mom comes back to her really creepy little like kid, like super creepy little dude that just kind of does whatever and is like, he reminds me of the thing from The Sixth Sense, like the little boy.
Oh, yeah.
It's just kind of weird, and like you don't know what's happening, or if he's like seeing something, or like PTSD at some level. But then like just looks at her and she's like, that girl's evil. There's no putting that to rest.
Yeah.
And then she just basically released it. But she figured out that after she was told that, and she's like, oh crap, I made a wrong decision. It seems like the whole story was going to be okay before that. Like, it seems like a happy ending, which you don't do with a horror movie, because then it ruins it. It's like, there's no horror, there's no, like, payoff. There's not the type of payoff people are looking for that a horror movie should have.
Yeah.
And then her boyfriend dies, and it's like, oh my god. The same way that the little girl at the beginning did, so it's like, there is a giant, like, stab to the heart at the end.
Yeah.
So it's like, I messed up, and now I have to pay for it. There's an actual consequence. And then so she just, the way to, like, get rid of it is you copy the tape and have someone else watch it, and then you're okay. Because she didn't die because she showed her son that. Or it was either her son or her boyfriend. And that's why she wasn't killed. Not because she saved the little girl, because she
perpetuated for someone else. Mm-hmm. Pass the buck.
Yeah, that was kind of thing. That was why I loved it so much, is because it left it on a creepy note that like she's gone through so much, and you don't know what's gonna happen to people that eventually see it. And it also opens up to a sequel, which Rings sucked. Everyone hates it. I haven't seen it, and I don't really want to, because I don't really want to ruin the note it left off on. Like there's a lot of things like
End on a high note. Kind
yeah,
of thing.
yeah.
Well, and you're talking about that too. That's such a typical concept that I see anymore is like, oh, here's like the ending, and then we're going to bring it back and show you everything that led up to it. So it's like that big treasure moment, but you don't know what created it. It's just a random ending occurrence, and then like, oh, let's bring you back to 20 years ago and lead up through this thing, or however long it takes to do the thing.
Yeah.
But very few stories ever start at the beginning anymore.
No.
They almost always start at the end, and then we're going to lead you up to like that anticipation moment of like, here's what the big thing is going to end up
Well, yeah,
being.
because it's kind of like people have walked down a straight road so much that it's boring now. You don't want to do that. So having like a winding path that it comes in different ways and goes around, and that's why nothing is ever in chronological order, is because it's like here's an outtake. And I think one of the more popular movies that I heard that just came out was Little Women, and it's all little vignettes, which are like tiny little moments that happen in the world. They're technically there and like a part of the story, but they don't happen chronologically per se, and they don't all connect to each other. So it's just, you have to make the story and build it together what you think it is. And it's more of an artsy kind of thing.
Yes.
But I'm just, like, The Sixth Sense was a good thing of that. Like, not a thing, a good example is what I'm saying. Where, you know, the dude comes in and he's like shoots a dude and you're like, oh my god. But then years later, it's like, okay, he's okay. And like spoilers for The Sixth Sense, just letting everyone know.
That's only a 30-year-old movie.
I know, but I just saw it and I didn't know about the ending. I mean, stuff like Star Wars, it's like, yeah, that was a mean Luke's father was Mr. Man, but like, not gonna spoil it. Make sure everyone, you know, keeps their secrets to themselves. But basically, at the end, it turns out that he did die from that bullet wound.
Bruce Willis.
Yes, Mr. Man with a weird receding hairline, like way too much on one side, not like enough on the other. It was really weird. But yeah, he turns out to be a ghost that the kid was talking to, and like, but it also added in details from before. It was like people don't know that they're dead, and like he didn't either, so it kind of played into it. Like that's like the tying of the knots and making sure there's no loose ends, and like having a really like close story, solid, have everything there is what I love about that kind of stuff.
Yeah, that one resolved every single piece, and
it was like okay,
there's a whole bunch of randomness throughout. It has those vignette moments, and mostly like the ones with him and his wife, where there's almost no communication, and they did that really good job of like they had this falling out because he was so dedicated to his job and like didn't pay enough attention to her, so when he was there, like he could just talk and she wouldn't respond, or she could just talk and he wouldn't respond because they were kind of disconnected or whatever. But it was because he was dead and neither one of them were actually able to speak to each other directly. So
yeah, and then when like she like was quote unquote cheating on him and he threw a brick to the window and walked away, that was like You understand, it's like it was like a heat of the moment kind of thing where you threw it and didn't want them to see who did that because that's kind of a childish thing to do. And I don't know, stuff like that where it was like it was the way it was supposed to be, where like it would have all have broken if he would have seen that they didn't see him or whatever at that moment. But it made sense for it to happen that way and it didn't feel forced. So, I don't know, allowing stuff to also happen naturally and making it so it's like, oh no, this love interest is this love interest because there's a gap that we have to fill, which I see a lot of movies do. That's why I don't like movies as much, is because they don't have to have as much plot right. Like, you can have something that's quote-unquote a good movie, but not have an awesome story or not really know what they're doing, because in a book you're so more constricted.
There's no acting.
Well, and
it's the painting of the picture through only the words.
And also making sure that all your words are correct and right. That's a big thing because that's all the words are, and you can't have music to like add to the effect. You only have what the person is reading. So you have to do a lot there, and that's why they have to, like, books a lot of times have to be done on a way stricter set of rules than movies.
So that's my question for you to wrap this up, is like, if you could give one tip on overcoming a barrier when it comes to writing, what would that be?
Like as writing itself, or like.
So if you're writing a story and you're trying to create a barrier and overcome that, what is a tip that you could use in that scenario?
So at least the thing that works a lot of times, and I think it had a specific name, but it was like the dip, where it was like you get them to a point where it does seem hopeless, where they get to such a low that there seems like there's no coming back, but it allowed them a rope to grasp. Not that you have to put the rope there, but make it seem like it was already there and it was like their idea that they found it. Like it was their choice to come back from that brink, and that they themselves use their resources to come back up.
So give me an example of that.
Well, I think that's kind of hard. So let's take it. Like I was watching a show recently where the whole world had like there was a giant explosion, everyone turned to stone. And it's like 3,000 years later, and everyone wakes up, and civilization is gone, but this dude knows everything about everything. He has to rebuild society. And so he's basically giving nothing. There's nothing he can do. His parents are dead, everything is dead, and there's a dude that wants to kill everyone. And so what he does is he manages to find his way to a village, and he uses their resources in order to build himself up to defeat against the army. It's like, there was that rope there, but it makes sense for that to be there because his dad was actually in space at the time, and so when everything happened, they didn't get killed. So it was actually like, because it takes millions of years. If everyone turned to stone and there were no humans, there would be no anything. Like there would still be no one there because it would take too long for evolution to get there. So having that piece that was already part of the story that came back, and they came back to Earth and were kind of the ones that made the first humans again.
Yeah,
it was a plot element that made sense to be there, but that wasn't forced. It was like, oh, there's just more people here. And it also adds, because when they first found it, it was like, oh, I'm the only human. It's me and this other guy that also woke up. They don't know anything about the statues or whatever, but then they see another person. It's also like a plot interest. So like a lot of stories, it's like you want to give them, they have the main thing that they're doing, but have like little intrigues here and there. That it's like, oh, there's this thing that kind of makes me want to go over here and explore this, like subplots. So it's like having that there's another person. Where did they come from? There must be more. So having that it kind of ties it all together. It is like that rope it was always there and available, and there was maybe some hints at it beforehand, but they were the ones that managed to either, make the rope out of whatever was there, or managed to find the rope and use it to climb back up the hill, like that kind of thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
Well, I appreciate your time here today, Ashton Farley. It's been a great episode with you, talking about overcoming writing barriers and also making sure stuff is scary in real life. That was my take on it. So if you guys enjoyed this, leave us a comment, subscribe, download, watch it, share it, like it, tweet it, favorite us. Also follow us everywhere you can find us. We're on all the places where you can find us, and we'll see you there.
See you guys.
Have a good day.